Good afternoon to everyone that's joined us so far. Right, let's get started. Good afternoon, everyone. I assume you can all see me okay. Thanks for joining us today. This is our very first Sumo Logic collaboration. Obviously, if you've seen us before, it's not the first webinar we've ever done, but it's the first one with Trust and Sumo together. So we think this will be first of many. So I'm Nick. You see me on the picture there. Take the glasses off. That's me. I look after the commercial cyber team here over at Trust. Alongside me is Zach, who will do his own introduction shortly. He's one of the solutions engineers over at Sumo Logic. He's going to evangelize and talk to you about SIEM, SOAR, the solutions that are provided by Sumo Logic, let you know what they're up to and how they're helping organizations, not just in the UK, but all around the globe. I'll do a little introduction to Trust. It's mandatory in any of these kind of presentations, so I'll let you know what we do. Then we'll pass over to Zach. He will introduce himself, as I said, and give you a good understanding of what great looks like from Sumo Logic. We will be recording this webinar, so we'll make this available. We'll edit out all the photos. We'll probably edit any bad language that gets spoken in here, but feel free to drop any questions in the chat. We'll open up the mics as necessary. I've just muted everyone a second ago, and I'll continue to do that to make sure there's no background noise. And regardless of how you feel about Trust and Sumo, at the end of this session, you'll be happy in the knowledge that you're all getting Uber Eats vouchers. So that's the big pull. We knew that'd get people in. And if those are watching this later, unlucky, you missed out. Okay, so let's have a little look at Trust. So we've been around a little while. So we're a tech-driven MSP, VAR, reseller, whatever you want to call us, based out the Cotswolds. Life began many moons ago as a network building engineer service provided by a few, which has grown to many. We're quite different to most security VARs in that we have a lot of in-house resource. We have a lot of people that work for Trust. They're not just sort of contracted in. We provide these to organizations as well as working in partnerships with people like Sumo. So independently, we can do a lot of networks, installs, services required, as well as obviously forming great partnerships. Here's a few customers, so it's mandatory. We show off some big logos on there. So we provide different things to different people. So we've got Wi-Fi in there, network builds, help desks, managed services. For those that shop at Aldi, it's probably more that shop at Aldi now than they used to, if we're being honest. All the screens, the signage you see in the Aldis and the co-ops, that's provided by us. So we manage and look after that for those organizations. So all those great offers you're seeing, we've helped put those on there. And then the likes of Fender, we provide security solutions for them and they look after themselves. So a good example there of our collaboration and also what we do is Arc. So Arc are a huge data center who continue to grow. I think they're building more. So we supply services to those guys. We have people on site. We do a lot of the day-to-day management of their infrastructure. But in the same token, we also resell some of their services. So they offer private public cloud hosting to organizations. They do huge and they do small. So we work with them on that. So we sort of offer services to them, but also provide services from them. And then also we work together with Arc and provide, maybe we provide the best SIEM solution around to those guys as well. Hence why some of this partnership started. This is pretty much the final slide from me. I'm not here to jabber on all day. I can see a few people still coming in and out, so sorry if you've missed a few bits. So from our point of view, as I said, we're independent. We get to work with a lot of partners and we get to choose who we work with. So we chose to work with Sumo Logic, and this is just some of the reasons why. Obviously, a lot more, and I don't want to steal the thunder. But moving forward, we didn't want to work with legacy SIEM providers. We wanted cloud native. We want what's going forward in the future. We want something that is going to help our customers alleviate the costs with rising data charges. Data's everywhere. It's becoming cheaper, but it still costs. So they've got solutions to help with that. Automation alerts, clearly that's the kind of thing you want from SIEM. Realistically, you don't want to be doing anything. You want it all done for you. And that's also where their AI comes into play. So everyone's doing AI, it's everywhere. But I think the point is we wanted AI that does something, not just for the sake of AI. We want something that does what it needs to do and that customers are going to benefit from. So that's pretty much me. If there are any questions, then feel free to drop them in. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and seamlessly, Zach's going to pick this up. I'll hand over. As I say, any questions, fire away. We'll jump in. There is a Q&A section at the end, which we can refer to, but I'm sure Zach won't mind taking a few pertinent questions along the way. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Thank you, everyone. And just again, as a very quick introduction to myself, so I'm a solutions engineer here at Sumo Logic. I mainly work on the technical aspects of the tool. I'll walk you through the demo today. We'll start off with just a quick check just to make sure that my screen's coming through okay. I should be sharing my slides. I think I'm getting a nod from Nick, so that's perfect. Okay, well, we're going to jump straight in. We'll talk a little bit around the sort of the landscape at the moment. We're obviously seeing a lot of evolution in the SIEM space and the security space in general. And one of the things that kind of stands out for us as a leading platform for enterprise solutions, especially in the SIEM space, SOAR space as well, is our ability to really significantly reduce the amount of noise a traditional SIEM would generally generate, as well as leveraging AI and moving towards more of an agentic framework as well. But we'll just level set because, of course, you probably come across many different variants and abbreviations in the cybersecurity space, especially around EDR, MDR, and then you've got, of course, XDR as well. Lots of DRs, and then you've got SIEM, SOAR, and all these other technologies. So I'll try to demystify that a little bit, just to kind of set some examples around it as well, just to make sure that's contextual. And then we'll go into the demo. We'll save some time at the end for some Q&A, but feel free to jump in and ask questions as we move along. If I can't get to it, then hopefully we've got some moderators on the call that can answer the questions, or we'll take them offline and come back to you. So just really quickly, just to kind of level set, I'm sure you're very comfortable with the idea of a SIEM and what we do. But generally speaking, a SIEM is much more comprehensive than your traditional EDRs, XDRs. In terms of being able to not only aggregate log data from a multitude of sources, irrespective of whether it's endpoint devices, firewalls, applications, workloads that are running in the cloud, but also comprehensively correlate, store the logs for GRC use cases as well, so governance, risk, and compliance. And of course, it needs to scale as well, right? Because you're going to be pumping much more data points than you would do your average XDR, for example. And of course, the overarching thing here, it needs to be highly configurable, but also it needs to be able to give you a turnkey experience, right? Many times, and we've probably seen this before, and you may have examples of that. You generally find SIEMs, you come across a SIEM, a legacy provider, integration patterns are non-existent, or if they do, they're quite limited. And that puts a cognitive load on the team, right? In terms of actually getting towards the point of where the SIEM is now working for you and it's operationalized. But getting people comfortable with the technology requires a lot of upscaling in some cases. EDRs, as we know, generally focused on endpoint devices, servers, endpoint devices, laptops, desktops, that type of thing. XDR is meant to broaden that a little bit more, still quite limited, not as comprehensive, and of course doesn't have capabilities around storing logs or storing data for a longer period of time. And that's where SIEM comes in. SIEM has always remained a cornerstone of every security strategy, I think since the last 10, 15 or so years, right? And the innate ability to be able to not only ingest vast amounts of data, but correlate comprehensively across those sources and map those events to potential signatures that often are flagged up in knowledge bases like the MITRE ATT&CK framework. And so modern SIEMs really integrate or at least embed AI and ML technologies to make sure that a lot of the abnormal or the anomalous activity that's happening is being flagged up without you having to go in and look for that. It's there to make sure that it really acts as a bit more of a technical wingman. So really just looking across the events, looking at the abnormal behaviors, flagging those up. And really, we really needed to also reduce the amount of signals it's creating and alerts, right? Because often what you'll see with legacy SIEM providers, EDRs as well, are also guilty of this, is they will generate a lot of noise, and then it's still up to the operator or the analyst to go in and figure out, okay, actually, what is a red herring, what is a true positive, what's a false positive. So very quickly on that note, naturally, what you'd expect from us, and I'm using two screens, so if I look that way, you'll have to forgive me. But again, traditional SIM providers and also modern SIM providers really need to be able to give you a number of different patterns in terms of ingesting data, but also try to make this more turnkey. Right, cybersecurity is quickly becoming not so much an afterthought anymore. It's something that's front and center of organizations, and some of the things that they need to implement in terms of making sure that they are not only compliant, they abide by regulatory requirements as well, but also at the same time they're able to withstand, detect in good time. So of course the reputation and also the potential vectors that could be used to expose a threat are minimized. So no different to what you'd expect from us. As a modern SIM, we're able to not only provide you a number of different patterns in terms of ingesting data, but also we provide you content out of the box as well. So not only will we provide dashboards, panels, queries, and monitors, but also we have a alert engine or another way of really attempting to reduce the amount of signals and the noise that the SIM generates. So getting you to the insights far quicker than potentially a legacy SIM that you might be using, right? So a lot of that correlation is done on your behalf. And so as we move through, just a bit of comic relief, right? Yesterday's SIM versus today's SIM, right? So lots of logs, naturally. The key signal that a SIM generally would ingest would be, of course, logs, right, as a primary signal. But what we are also seeing, and maybe a topic for another day, is this consolidation space that we're entering. A lot of organizations are now looking at the potential headwinds and of course, looking back and thinking, actually, this is a good environment or a good space to start to consider consolidating. So can my SIM provider also allow for ingestion of metrics and traces? And now can I use it for potentially observability use cases? But we're going to focus on logs as a primary signal. Really, some of the challenges with I suppose, modern or existing security monitoring tools, right? It's very difficult to architect. You need to upskill teams in some cases, upscale them. Of course, in the inability to assess threats, too many data points. We're in an age of way too many data points naturally, and that's been further exacerbated by the fact that we've got AI. AI is doing a lot of the bulk lifting and it's very quickly to deploy applications. And with that, of course, introduced additional vulnerabilities. At the same time, new vectors are being created by leveraging AI as well. And naturally, we've probably heard this quite a lot. Bit of a cliche, but absolutely still very true and still very much resonates with a lot of organizations that we speak with on a day-to-day. The amount of alerts that generally gets generated are very vast, right? And of course, can't scale easily as well. Traditional SIMs may have an option for either hosting it on-prem or, of course, a cloud offering. And again, if you're hosting it on-prem, generally speaking, the onus rests with you in terms of watering it, feeding it, maintaining it, patching it. So the new way of doing this is really to have and take advantage of elasticity, right? Making sure that the technology scales on its own without you having to worry about managing architecture or underlying storage, for example. And so we'll just kind of double click on that a little bit, right? The key problems, and we dissect that a little bit more, is really around a data problem, right? The scalability, the amount of data points that we are now generating by leveraging lots of different architecture to run our workloads. Of course, naturally high cost management. How do we get to high fidelity alerts, right? Better alerts than what we're getting today. The amount of velocity of these alerts being created. And naturally, we'll see, obviously, there's a resource issue as well, right? Making sure that we're able to keep the right resources to be able to run this technology to essentially reduce the technical debt associated with it as well. And so where do we come in, right? I mean, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, we're highly scalable. We're running the cloud, built in the cloud. We'll take workloads irrespective of wherever they're running, wherever they're hosted, cloud hyperscalers, and of course, on-prem as well. And of course, SaaS technologies, and we'll correlate across all of those. So just a quick example of some of the endpoints or some of the device logs that we'll get, or some of the logs, I should say, that we'll get Obviously, logs from EDRs, your traditional EDRs, OS system logs, SaaS tools, your network devices, IAM and identity access management tools, and of course your cloud infrastructure as well. And we can do that really well. We can scale very well in terms of being able to cope with a number of different data points ingested in any 1 minute. We can organize the data, structure it, so you don't have to worry about indexing logs to a schema that we dictate before you can even use the logs. And at the same time, we'll correlate some of the events with threat feeds that we already embed in the technology as well. So again, our promise to you and our ode to you in the cybersecurity space is that we'll try to correlate and try to bear the brunt of most of this while you focus on the things that matter, right? Innovating, operationalizing, and really getting to the threats and remediating them as quick as possible to minimize the potential exposure. So where do we sit? A quick animation here, right? I mean, kind of just trying to contextualize this, kind of the problem that we have, right? Records, logs coming in, the amount of signals that get generated. We then create something called insights. We're going to flag up how much of these require no further action, false positives, we'll rule them out, and then incidents, right? And really what we're trying to demonstrate here is our ingestion pipeline is built for this very thing, right? The ability to take in as many logs as possible, scale with that as well, without you having to worry about having to add additional resources, manage that infrastructure. We're going to take those 10 billion records and we're going to see signals. Now, traditional SIEMs, this is where they end, right? They allow you to ingest the data, and then they will create signals. Signals are useful in terms of course, the threat investigation, but it's not the be and end all, because signals can be on good signatures and bad signatures. What you don't want is a multitude of signals being created and then leaving that with your team to go in and investigate, because that's going to take away time and resources. And of course, it's a very, very big piece of work to undertake in any SOC, irrespective of size. But what we were able to do with the Sumo Logic SIEM is really take that 9.8 million plus signals, for example, and of course this is all hypothetical, right, in terms of the numbers that we're giving, but this is the type of customers that we do work with and the types of data points that we do ingest into the platform. So hopefully it's a good example. But we can take those signals and generate 175 insights. Now you're probably wondering, how do you get from 9.8 million signals and then jump into insights, right? And we're going to walk you through that within the demo. And of course, really being able to provide you clear and a definitive way on saying, okay, focus on these ones. These look much more like high fidelity alerts that you should focus on. And these are some of the false positives that we've discovered. Right, I'm going to switch from that. I'm going to go into the SIEM. Hopefully I'm still sharing okay. Just let me know if I am not. I think I am.
All good. Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Perfect. So I'll just quickly level set and give you some of the benefits of the platform. So we know where we are. This essentially is the core platform. We're going to go into the SIEM module as well, which is an additional module that you can add on top of the platform, go into automation to round it off. But we're really going to want to start with things that you're probably seeing today already, right? Maybe some of the organizations that you're working with, or in your SOC, or in your department, you're very used to coming in and stand up, and in that stand up you want to be able to retrospectively look back on the key findings, key events that have happened. And the thing that you'll notice is we're going to map everything in Sumo Logic in terms of events and signatures to the attack framework. So we're not going to be too far from what the norm is and the de facto. Again, hopefully making that much more easier for you to identify the things that you need to focus on, and also where an actor could be in a kill chain, and also what the next strategy could be, and how you can really get the jump on them and contain that threat as soon as possible. So it's very easy to see, okay, the discovery attempts, lateral movement, command and control, and so on. Of course, we're going to couple that with some metrics. This is data flowing out of the SIEM module back into the core platform. The core platform, essentially, as I've mentioned, is where we are now. That's really where you're going to do most of your day-to-day. So we're going to come in and create your users, create your roles, create your dashboards, your panels, your monitors, and of course where you query as well. The SIEM, again, is really there as an additional layer, an augmented layer, to really take all the events and make it contextual and make this much more easier to digest, as opposed to giving you a big data analytics engine for you to go away and figure this out. Right, so we've got some metrics. How long was it taken to detect some of these threats, these malicious signatures? How long does it take to respond to them? How long does it take to remediate? And of course, statuses and who's assigned to what. So really a 30,000-foot view of the events that are taking place right now, yesterday, 24 hours ago, 3 days ago, whatever it might be. And then, of course, if we wanted to, we can interact with these panels. We can go and see the actual underlying query, do some different aggregations, calculations on them if we want to change the layout of the panel if we wish. So you have full features in terms of being able to customize this to your liking, right? To make sure that it works with what you might want to see in your SOC. I'm just going to pause there. I don't think there's any questions, but yeah, okay. Feel free to nudge me if you do have a question. I mentioned as well at the beginning part of this call that the SIEM should be able to provide you content, right? We want to make sure that we are almost commoditizing this, right? SIEMs, traditionally speaking, have been far too complex. It requires a SOC team to really manage it. You need, and then of course with that you start to develop tribal knowledge as well, right? People are appointed the custodians of this technology, right? They're the only people that you can go to. You don't really know how you can operationalize this, how other users that are new to the organization may onboard and how they can interact with the technology, right? So it's really a case of being able to give you that turnkey experience, provide you content out of the box, dashboards, as I mentioned, monitors, for example, as well. And this is, again, committing to that promise, right? Making sure that we give you the content so you can really realize the insights as quick as possible, right? As opposed to spending days on end in terms of trying to get to these types of insights, these events, and understand them better. So again, just an example of one of the dashboards that we provide. This is really focused on IAM activity, policy changes, any kind of security group changes, VPC changes, and of course give you a honeycomb chart, different visuals that you can use really to represent that data. But again, powerful visuals that helps you really understand this much better in a much more human readable format, as opposed to giving you a tabular form and a query engine, and then of course you kind of trying to put all this together. So again, just a commitment to our overall, I suppose, overall sort of perception in terms of how this should look and how this experience should really be for new users and of course existing users as well. And from this, again, not deviating from what the de facto is, using the traffic light system, red, amber, green, very easy to figure out where I need to focus on and where are my problem areas and what I should really be looking into, right? And of course, all these panels, as I mentioned, they're interactable. You can click onto them. You can dive more deeper into these views as well, should you wish. Again, another primary example of a dashboard. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these dashboards. I think you're going to get the idea after viewing a few of those. But again, different services in AWS in this example, right? Whether the data is coming out from Security Hub, whether it's coming from S3 buckets, whether it's coming from CloudTrail, right? We've got content that we have available for you to use that will flag up the key events and those malicious signatures if there are any that exist. So in here is very quickly very easy to identify the amount of findings, the last 20 findings, and of course anything that's critical. In our case, we've been pretty good in terms of managing our environment, and we haven't seen any critical severity findings. But really just, again, looking at the data in ways that maybe you wish to look at the data, right? As opposed to providing you this engine and then you having to create the content. So lots of content, lots of dashboards that come out of the box. We've got, of course, apps for other technologies that organizations tend to use, right? Whether they're running workloads on hyperscalers, whether they're running Cloudflare and using WAF technologies or CDNs, right? We've got content for pretty much all the key players. And we'll give you a quick view into the app catalog. We boast over 450 integrations that come out of the box. If we don't have an integration that comes out of the box, we offer a pattern to ingest that data, right? That could be using OpenTelemetry, that could be using syslog, that could be making API calls to endpoints if they have a REST API. So just know, as long as it's not a black box, you'll be able to ingest that data into Sumo Logic. And again, here, just Cloudflare data, right? Some of the key events, right? As opposed to me figuring this out. Again, I'm going to surface this up. I'm going to expect my SIEM to really surface this data up to me so I can just very quickly at a high level understand whether there's a presence of an adversary, what are the threat indicators that really signal the fact that there could be something untoward happening in my environment. And of course, what are the key entities that I'm tracking here? Right, and you can see the IP addresses, countries where the traffic is coming in from, any kind of threats that have been stopped. Again, the type of data that you're really going to want to get to as soon as you incorporate a SIEM into your SOC or into your operations center. And again, another key example here, I'm not going to go through this, but again, things that you'd expect, right? The things that you might be tracking already. And maybe you're doing this locally by going into every server, maybe you're doing this at an aggregate layer, maybe you have a SIEM already that you're using, but looking out for those key events, right? Especially when it comes to endpoints, who's elevating privileges? Are they storing data outside of the directory or the root directory? Are they trying to run binaries that are running as elevating privileges and running as the root, for example? Key events really signaling and surfacing them up so it's easy for the analyst to see, but also what I wanted to show you here is the fact that we incorporate AI and ML into the technology, as I mentioned earlier, right? So here you've got a set and forget option. This purple triangle essentially represents those anomalies, and that's what we're looking for a lot of the time, right? The anomalies that happen within in our environment that we often don't see. That purple triangle represents an outlier function that essentially is configurable. You can change it. You can say, okay, the standard deviation point is this, take X amount of data points. Here's the window that I want to use to analyze this. But essentially, you do have a set and forget option as well. And that's where that technical wingman comes in, right? He's looking at the data. We're leveraging machine learning to understand the behavior of data streams coming in and then flagging up, okay, when we see peaks and troughs or unusual behaviors. And from that, you can magnify on this and then, of course, go into the logs and investigate further, right? So we've got the use of AI machine learning to really aid us in our security responses and investigations. And of course, another example of another source, right, IS. And again, I won't go into too much detail, but content for pretty much any source is really what we're aiming for and making this as turnkey as possible. What we also do with the platform is provide you with 2 threat feeds that come out of the box that's already embedded in Sumo logic. And in this case, going back to the earlier mention, when I look at a SIEM, I look at a modern SIEM, I'm thinking about a modern SIEM, I want this to be, in some regard, commoditized and really turnkey, right? I don't want to have to write correlation engines or correlation rules. I don't want to necessarily have to come in and write big, bulky queries that are not as performant, are not as optimized. As a leading cybersecurity solution, I should expect you to come in with some of that content to give me a bit of a step forward in terms of how I react to certain types of security events, right? Do the correlation for me, and this is what we aim to do, and we try and we strive for. In this case, we're using that threat intel feed coming out from CrowdStrike. We're correlating on entities. In this case, we're focused on the IP address, and we can very quickly surface up using the IOCs coming out from that threat feed, whether that IP address has been associated with an actor. Where in the kill chain, typically we've seen that before, right? So again, making sure that you have a robust strategy to contain the threat and respond to any kind of surface attacks that could be taking place or unfolding. And then now we're going to focus more on the SIEM, but I'll just pause there just to see if there's any questions. Feel free to ask if there are any. I don't see.
There is a question, Zach, if you want to answer it now.
Yeah, sure.
Can this pull data from on-premise environments as well as cloud services? Someone's got a hybrid setup, so connectivity, ingestion, and flexibility are really important.
Absolutely, yeah, exactly. So yeah, whether the workloads are running on-prem, whether they're running in hyperscalers, whether they're SaaS tools, we can ingest that data in. We've got a couple of different patterns, so we can of course leverage syslog. We've got our own collector, which runs as a JVM, and what we are now seeing, and as part of our overall strategy to really onboard signals from whatever source, is using OpenTelemetry. So it's gained a lot of traction. It's obviously this one of the most active projects on CNCF. It's just recently graduated, and it's really providing a way of standardizing on how we collect data. So yes, a really long answer to that question, but in summary, yes, we can. Perfect. Okay, so we've seen content, right? The other thing that we probably want to do is focus on syntax, right? I mean, the other thing that I think most of us have probably come across, especially in this space, is great. I've got a SIEM, I've got a data analytics engine, right? I need to upskill. I need to figure out this query language, right? And you're going to see a lot of these KQL, EQL, DQL, PromQL. There's a lot of QLs out there, right? What that really means for me is, okay, I need to learn something new. So it'd be nice to be able to use AI for that, right? And that's where generative AI comes in as well. And we recognize that. Now, you're still going to get the more technically inclined individuals that like to work with syntax. If you're a developer, or somebody who likes to get very involved, spend a lot of the time on the command line, absolutely, we've got something for you as well. You can come in and do that, right? You can use IntelliSense to figure out on what logs are coming in. We'll categorize the logs, and of course, you can pass things on the fly as well. So we will still have that capability as well. And of course, naturally, you probably see the most amount of flexibility when you're spending time on the console, right? The other thing that we'll do is we'll focus on how we're starting to move away from that to some degree, and recognizing the fact that the barrier to entry with these types of technologies is the onboarding process, right? Is that steep learning curve of being familiar with the technology and how do you get comfortable with it, and again acts as a bit of a barrier in terms of actually getting to the insights and reduce that technical debt, because the longer it takes to get onboarded, the longer it takes to get familiar with it, the less time you have to react to threats as they unfold, because they're not going to wait until, of course, the teams are upskilled and upscaled. Threat actors and actors out there will continue to try to exploit vulnerabilities. So still have the query language, of course. You'll recognize here we haven't deviated too much from SQL or data-defined language, so you don't have to worry about another QL in the mix, right? What we will do is give you a lot of flexibility. Now, if you've got structured, unstructured, semi-structured data, key point to mention really doesn't matter for us. We'll ingest that data in. We'll also give you the capabilities to parse over data on the fly as well. So you can parse over it. Maybe there's a field that we haven't extracted, and you want to take that out. For example, you can do that and just say, okay, HTTP version, for example, right? Little things that we add just to make your life a bit more easier. Now, when I run this query, it's going to always extract that field out, have that ready available for me, and I can use it as an additional filter. You can also do this at ingest. So rather than having this configured at this point, rather I want this data source to always have these fields available for me. So when I come into the query engine, it's always available for you. So you can create things like field extraction rules. And those field extraction rules essentially is what I did there. But all it does is at the beginning of the ingestion, it extracts those fields out and has them available for you to use later on. You can index data in many different ways, right? You can send data to a default partition, or you can create your own partitions. And again, giving you control back in terms of optimizing, making this more efficient, making this more performant, right? By using partitions, otherwise known as indexes in some other technologies or other vendors, right? Is really creating separate or a subset of data based on some kind of namespace coming in with that data stream, right? So, for example, if I've got Kubernetes data coming in, and I want to send data from a particular namespace into its own index, so when I query that, it's a lot more optimized, it's a lot more performant. I can do that, and of course, you can wrap RBAC controls around that as well to make sure that the right people have access to that data and they can query that data, and of course, really conforming to the idea of least privileges, right? So making sure that people who need the access have the access. People who don't need the access, of course, don't have rights to that. And of course, we'll pause as well. I probably won't spend too much time on that today. As I can see, we're close, rapidly approaching time, right? But I do want to just very quickly show you the 2 threat feeds that we've already got in the box. And of course, that doesn't take away from the fact that you can onboard your own threat feeds as well into Sumo Logic. But as you can see, we've got a lot of indicators of compromise coming out from CrowdStrike, and we've got many different IOCs coming out from Intel 471 as well. So really making sure that once you have data ingested into the platform, you can enrich that as much as possible and correlate and really get to those true findings much more quicker. All right, we'll have a quick look at Mobot. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. This is currently in beta, due to go GA fairly soon. Essentially, as I mentioned earlier, the modern SIEM is really moving towards, and it's quickly evolving, it's moving towards more of an agentic framework now, right? I want to run agents, and an agent should go away and do this, as opposed to putting that cognitive load on the analyst. And so we're doing the same thing, right? We've got agents already embedded in the platform. We'll show you an example of that. We've now in the process of releasing the query agent as well as the knowledge agent as well. So what you have is the query agent is really giving you the ability to go away, ask a question in natural language, and of course provide you some kind of response to that, help you create dashboards on the fly, and of course it's turn-based as well. So really giving you the same experience as you might have with the likes of ChatGPT and other LLMs, right? And the knowledge agent is really there again to demystify the how-tos, right? So as opposed to me consulting documents or Sumo Logic docs, I can just write a question into the knowledge agent. The agent goes away and brings back the step. So now you've got somewhere within the actual user interface for Sumo Logic to ask those types of questions. How do I do this? How do I onboard this data stream? And so on, right? So these agents are really there to empower you much more. And I've also really lowered the bar to entry when it comes to adopting this technology as well. We'll go into the SIEM very quickly. Naturally, we've got monitoring as well. You can create your alerts. We probably won't have time to dive into that in too much detail. But just know, of course, we've got many different ways of configuring those monitors as well. More than happy to have follow-up sessions after this as well. Of course, going through Nick and the Trust Systems team. Now we go into the Cloud SIEM. And in this case, what we wanted to do is really provide this different experience, right? So you've got the core engine where you can do most of your housekeeping, probably spend most of your time. The SIEM UI, that module is really there to augment that experience. It's there to look across your sources and provide you with rule detections that figure out when it's a malicious signature, and you should be aware of that. But also at the same time, reduce the amount of noise it's going to generate by using an adaptive clustering algorithm to focus in on that entity, right? So really, again, going back to that commitment of making sure that we reduce the amount of noise and give you more truer positives. But just to kind of level set, right? So as soon as you come in, it gives you the same experience as really entering the cockpit of a fighter engine or a fighter jet, right? You've got this radar, you've got your insights here, that's your targets there. You've got this outer ring that represents the logs that are coming in, everything that's been normalized. And of course, you've got these signals firing, which are represented by these bars. Then, of course, you've got some data around this UI. You've got the top ticket item, statuses, and so on, right? So this is really there just to kind of give you a landing zone of the state of affairs as we see it. A couple of things that you should expect from the SIEM or traditional SIEMs that you may not see already, right? As I mentioned, we are committed to the MITRE-ATT&CK framework. We use the same terminology, nomenclature as found in the MITRE-ATT&CK framework. Here, you can really run a gap analysis in your environment, right? So you can say of the recent activity that's taking place, how well am I covered against these different types of tactics and techniques, or the underlying techniques underneath them? And you can see, okay, we've got some good coverage when it comes to initial access, but very low coverage when it comes to compromised software, account manipulation, and so on. You can also do a theoretical coverage of all the rules that I've got currently configured in my SIEM. How well am I able to withstand these tactics and techniques that an actor could take, right? And now you can see we've got some more high coverage around account discovery, but low coverage around compromised hardware and so forth, right? And with that, you can use that as a means to tune the rules that you've currently got, create new rules, but also figure out the sources that you really need in terms of being able to provide that comprehensive cover or coverage of a potential vector being exploited, right? As described in the MITRE-ATT&CK framework. The other thing that you should really expect to see from a modern SIEM is rule detections, right? It's great to come in, give you the flexibility of being able to create your rules, but how much of this can you provide to me? Do you have a dedicated threat labs team? Yes, we do. Sumo Logic has our own SOC, our own dedicated threat labs team that are looking at these types of events taking place, whether they're the day 0, day 2 attacks, and really writing the appropriate rules to match against those signatures, right? So we have 1,000 rules out the box and counting, but we also do provide you with the option of creating your own rules as well, right? So you can create rules based on different types: match rules, thresholds, kill chains, aggregation, and our Uber rules as well are all part of the platform. So in legacy vendors, you may have seen that Uber is modular. You need to pay or invest a little bit more into the licensing to be able to get access to the AI and underlying ML technologies that will help you identify those anomalies, right? Whether it's a user logging in from a location that's unrecognized, or whether they're trying to log in and they've unsuccessfully logged in, followed by a successful login, right? How do we map that back to a potential brute force attempt and so forth? So Uber is already included, but we've got a number of different other types of rule detection methods that you can use to create rules, and of course describe the signatures that you're looking for. And we're going to walk through a live example of this, just to kind of show you what this looks like, right? And we'll start with an insight. An insight, essentially, I think in many other SIM tools, you may have seen it called as a use case, right? It's that correlation. And really in our world, it's all about providing you with the outcome of what that correlation has done, and drawing some conclusions in terms of what this actor could be doing or trying to achieve in terms of the end goal, right? So we'll go through that. We'll have a look at one of these insights. Let's pick on one of these. Let's see what's currently happening right now. And I think we are going to have a look at this guy. Sorry, I'm not sure if there's a question. Okay, perfect. First thing, right? If you're used to SIMs, if you're used to this technology, you are going to come in and have to go through a lot of signals, right? And figure out whether these signals actually mean anything. Are they actually things that I need to pay attention to, right? I need to correlate on these. I need to go to external sources. I need to figure out whether that this entity has been found in other databases, other lookups, or other threat feeds, right? So a lot of correlation needs to be done on that. What we're going to do, first of all, is use one of our agents called the summary agent to contextualize this and just make this much more human readable, right? So as opposed to going through every signal and then looking at keywords and trying to understand and decipher this, how about we just use the summary agent just to contextualize this, right? Makes this much more sensible in our world, right? Now I can see very quickly Olivia Taylor involved in a multi-state attack, started off with a phishing email. From that, we can see it launched a shell. Then we see some macros being executed, then got picked up by antivirus. We see some known file extensions for ransomware. And then we see an unusual spike in data right across machines. Great, fantastic. That gives me at least an idea, and especially for maybe some juniors that you may have in your organization or even senior members, right? All of that is coupled contextual, and I know exactly what's happening, right? And of course, as you can see, we're using the same nomenclature as offered by the MITRE-ATT&CK framework. So same tactics, techniques are all mapped. Now, if I wanted to click onto this and look at this in more detail, I can do, right? And this is great in terms of actually understanding the signals and also how we get to a scenario where we are able to take from that earlier example, that infographic that we showed you, the volume of logs, the volume of signals, and then create insights, right? And this is where our adaptive clustering algorithms kick in. So the end goal, we think that this maps to an impact with exfil attempt and lateral movement. We'll show you why we think that. And also we're going to give you a bit of an integrity check as well from our side, right? Globally, we think that that's got a 95 score. That's based on our threat intel research team, our threat labs team, and of course, other insights that we've seen that have been created off the back of data being ingested from all the data sources that we have, right? So giving you some confidence in terms of the finding. The entity that we're focusing on is Olivia Taylor. And then, of course, we see that breakdown in the signals, right? And as I mentioned earlier, that summary agent is still here. That's contextualized all the signals here and really just put that into that human readable form. But if we wanted to investigate the signals, we can do. And again, this is going to be very, very useful in terms of getting to the root of the problem, understanding the trajectory of the problem, and also potentially how we can contain that threat as well. So we know, started off with a phishing email, great. We've parsed and normalized this data, so you don't have to. So again, another thing, you don't need to index logs ahead of using that log or using that data. We're going to extract, normalize, map, enrich on your behalf. And we've extracted out the key fields that make this relevant to a threat investigation, right? But it did start with a phishing email. And in that email, there's an attachment, there's a PDF document, right? And then, of course, we see the other signals just underneath it, as described in that summary agent. So we see that launching of the shell, we see the host name that Olivia is running it on. We see a first seen rule, so Uber rules already configured to be used, right? And we see these little 3s everywhere as well, and some of them are 5s as well, right? That is the weight or the threat score that we attach to these signals. So really, again, giving it some kind of weight, some kind of credence in terms of actually the type of the impact this could have, right? So as soon as these threat scores cumulatively add up to more than 12 in the space of 14 days as a default behavior, will create an insight, right? And this, of course, a couple of things have to be consistent in this to work, right? It's got to focus on the entity. So Olivia Taylor needs to be associated with rules within the Sumo logics. She needs to match against those, right? And of those rules, if they all add up to more than 12, that's when we create the insight. So the big key focal point here is on that entity. We're tracking the entity for longer periods of time. And then, of course, we see the rest as described in that summary agent, right? But what if I want to understand the blast radius, right? Maybe it's an attachment. Maybe other people have received that attachment. How do I know, how far this attachment has gone, right? Who else has interacted with it? What other systems? Well, you can do that. You can create a blast radius in Sumo Logic, right? You can isolate that file, expand that out, and continue to build out this threat map, as it were, or this blast radius, as I like to call it. And now you can see some other entities that have interacted with it, right? So you can see Tim Smith, Chloe Baker's in there, some other hosts, some other systems have interacted with this document as well. So that gives you a bit more of an idea in terms of my containment strategy. How do I contain this before it starts to move to far corners of my environment and start to really cause some damage, right? And then, of course, we can see some enrichment taking place. We're going to take that IP address, we're going to check with abuse IBTP, or of course, another threat feed of your choosing, and we're going to bring back some important information around the status of the actor, right? Has it got a malicious confidence score, a reputation? What has it belonged to before? Any threat groups that IP address has been associated with before? Really just enriching that much more for you, just to make sure that, again, you've got context when it comes to your investigations, right? And then, of course, that leads on to how you respond to threats as soon as they're discovered, or potentially a presence of an adversary. And that's where automation comes in, or playbooks. And we're going to look at playbooks in a bit more detail, but you can run playbooks as soon as insights are created. And again, that's really taking the onus away from the operator or the analyst and having a repeatable, scalable playbook that runs every time certain conditions match, right? And we'll go into that in more details. I won't go into these ones that are attached to this insight, but we'll go into the actual automation engine to show you that in more detail.
Zach, just to make you
Sure.
aware, it's 12:50, so we've got sort of 10 minutes, so we can fit some Q&A at the end.
Yeah, absolutely.
Give you another 5 minutes or so, if that's okay.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, we'll jump into automation and then we'll open it up. We'll open up the floor for Q&A. So automation engine, this is really that response matrix, right, that you create. What happens in the event of, and how do I contain that threat? So let's just take, for example, first of all, just to quickly note, we have over 500 playbooks that we've created out the box for you. So pre-opinionated playbooks that you can use in your environment, adjust, tweak, depending on the tech stack that you're using. But again, a pre-opinionated way in terms of responding to certain threats, right? So let's just say brute force, for example, or it could be advanced persistent threats. It could be command and control or whatever. So lots of playbooks for different scenarios, right? We'll take one of these playbooks and magnify that or double click it just to give you an example. And again, you can create some very complicated or very straightforward workflows, right, in response to an insight being created. And in this case, you can see, okay, it starts here. We're using carbon black. We're using some enrichment here. We've got a task that needs manual invocation. So we've sent a question to somebody. Somebody needs to come in and approve it. And then it goes along the decision tree, right? And then at this point, we're going to contain the threat using the McAfee Web Gateway That could be different for you. You might have another EDR or an antivirus technology that you want to use in replacement of that. And then the list goes on, right? So lots of pre-opinionated playbooks, lots of integrations that come out of the box as well. If we haven't got an integration, you can build your own integration, right? But again, key players, AWS, Jira's, Zscaler. I mean, we've got over 333 integrations. So many integrations that come out the box with actions that we've already created that you can use and leverage as part of your response strategy. So again, if you find a threat and you see a user trying to associate themselves with a group and you want to remove those privileges, you can automate that with the automation engine. So a lot of different scenarios that you can create workflows for in response to insights that get created. And we probably don't have enough time to go through all of them. But that's kind of what I want to leave it as a brief introduction into Sumo Logic. I want to make sure that we've got enough time for thoughts and feedback, and as well as Q&A as well. But any questions, anything top of mind for anyone on the call here today?
I think everyone's been a bit shy, Zach, as is often the case on these. There is a question there around, is there a trial or sandbox version of the platform to you to get hands on and understand how it would fit in our own environment?
Yeah, absolutely. We do have a sandbox environment. It's non-obligatory as well. So you can work with data, dummy data that we've pumped into that. And of course, you can start to build out those reflexes in Sumo Logic without any kind of commitment contractually.
Okay, that's great. I've just popped up in the any questions slide there to make it obvious for anyone who does want to ask any questions. Obviously, I can ask plenty, but I don't want to. I mean, it's great to see every time I think I see a run through of this, I see something new that's really good. It's so comprehensive, but I think the key thing is in these sort of run throughs, the idea is to show everything it can do. Once this kind of stuff's done, the day-to-day, it should be a lot more hands-off than that. But I think the whole idea is we can see how easy it is to manage, how slick it is. Someone within the chat has complimented the journey through the product as well, so that's good to hear. Any questions? If anyone wants to put the hand up even and speak, then feel free. We'll let you in. If you want to drop anything in the chat, you can. We'll have for a little bit of time. Obviously, everyone's eager to know when they can get the vouchers. That will be distributed by the Sumo guys, I think, shortly after this. So don't worry. I can't tell you exactly when. I don't know if you're having a lunch or whether you're going to use your vouchers for dinner later on. But any questions, anything else anyone wants to ask whilst we've got Zach on here? I think he's done a great job. He had an easy ride. No one's challenged him. Olivia's right something then. Yeah, okay. People just appreciate seeing it ran through. So I think next step, Zach, I mean, obviously we've shown the question was asked around the sandbox. We can book sessions, can't we, with the guys, one-to-one sessions? Is there a sort of POC, POV kind of thing available as well down the line?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So, you've got the sandbox environment, but if you do want to go through a POC, POV, more than welcome to, of course, engage with us and Trust Systems would be more than happy to walk you through that. That'd be an ideal scenario, naturally. Yeah,
that's good stuff. Well, in the absence of any questions, I think we can give 5 minutes back to everyone. Appreciate you coming on. Appreciate you, Zach, for that run through. That's really good. Appreciate that, and for all my everyone helping at Trust to keep the session going and to set us up in the first place. We'll obviously the obligatory reach out to everyone, get a bit of feedback, but feel free to be proactive and contact me, and we can have a chat. We can set something up, or you can tell me to go away. It's your choice, but let's engage and see what we're going to do from here. Any final words, Zach, or can we let everyone go?
From us, we really appreciate the opportunity. We really hope that we can have further conversations and again, gauge from you as well, feedback and what you're seeing and the evolutions as well in the cybersecurity space. So we really appreciate the collaboration and we look forward to that. And again, thank you again, Nick and Trust Systems for organizing this.
Brilliant. So I think we'll wrap that up. thank you everyone for coming along. Hopefully we'll see you again soon. Have a great day. Have a great week. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.